Hey, welcome everybody to Pro Mindset Podcast. This is your host, Craig Domann. Today, put your seatbelts on. We've got a guy if you're a CEO, you're a leader, you're somebody that aspires to be in a position like that. You're going to learn a lot today. We have on our show today, Randall Thames, and Randall is too many things to say. Author, executive leadership coach, all these things. Randall, welcome to Pro Mindset.
Thanks, Greg. I really appreciate it. Let me just pause and say I'm humbled and honored. I know that time is the most valuable commodity. And the fact that you are allowing me to come on and spend some time with you, I think is great. Thanks so much.
You are welcome. So that you can adequately communicate like just where you've been, your just kind of like your story.
Yeah.
Share for our audience your story.
Yeah. So, I spent 38 years in corporate America, and I shouldn't say and in that span of time, and I worked with Fortune 5 companies a couple of times as a corporate executive. And so with that, I actually had a complementary career. And that career consisted of, while in the 90s, we'll break it down into chunks. So while in the 90s, I actually was a certified fitness trainer. So I would wake up in the morning, I would go out, I would teach classes. They were outdoor adult classes where, we would get people going. And I did that for a number of years in addition to the corporate job. That's the 90s. In the 2000s, I actually then became a certified executive coach. So I was coaching both formally and informally, both privately as well as in service for the company. But I did that. And then also in the 2000s became a licensed, ordained, certified pastor. And so if you look at the trajectory of my career over that 38-year span, that's inclusive of being a workout guy, being a person that helped professionally in terms of a transformation, and then kind of the spiritual, the mentoring, the ministry, the preaching, the teaching as a pastor, all of those things kind of had a common thread, and it's to help improve people and organizations. And so all of that has kind of culminated in my last 6 years in professional life. I worked for a major global executive leadership development and search firm, and as a senior partner. And so I dovetail all of that and say, now what I do is I inspire people to ignite that fire that is inside of them, physically, spiritually, professionally. That's what I do.
Okay, so what is the superpower that people have that a lot of people don't even know they have?
Well, so, I'm of the belief that everyone is a masterpiece. And so that masterpiece exists inside of everyone. Therefore, In Spirit Institute is a place, a hub, a repository, the Institute, so many different channels and ways where people can reach their inner spirit, their inner masterpiece, and really create value for everything and everyone around them. So what is that? Well, that's the journey that I like taking people on. In my book, Rise to the Role, it's the role of life. It's the role of who are you and what's your why? It's the role of let's tap into that I call it the super purpose power. So what that is, it's a unique value set or skill set that you have it and no one else in the world has what you have. But so many people don't operate under that. And so what we do is it's a very simple methodology and framework. And it's laid out in the book. It's first you got to decide that you want to pursue it. Then you discover, develop, and then ultimately display it for everyone. And you don't display it just for yourself, but you display that superpower so that everyone else can benefit just being around you.
Okay, how do people give us a couple steps on how do you discover it? So just take me, okay? Husband, father of 3 kids, soon to be a grandfather, which is super dope. I'm lost. I don't know what my purpose is.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. I'm at that point where you age out of things from time to time. Where do I start to discover?
It's doing I would call it a scan of who you are. And so part of that scan, it could be psychometric testing. There's the tests that are out there, personality types testing, professional skill sets, MBTI. It's the Gallup test. So there's so many different, and you can get a lot of these online. All you have to do is Google, self-assessment testing. And part of these tests will create what I call a foundation or a platform of discovery. And so the discovery process, you can do that online, or you know what you can do is, and this is what I do, is sometimes it's as simple as you are the product of the 5 to 6 people you hang around. So you tell me who your 5 or 6 people are. I'm going to go ask them a series of questions. Like, what do you come to Craig for? What do you think? Like when you ask him advice, you're going to get a solid answer. What are some of the things that when you see him, he's head down doing this, he may skip a meal even in doing this. What keeps him up at night, in your opinion? When he's texting you, what is a common theme? So that's like a very simple way of discovery. And then you can go all the way on the other end of data and insights through some of these psychometric tests. So it's really creating what I call your scan of your life, and in getting that data, getting the insights, getting the experiences from that data, and then giving that back to you. They say feedback is a gift. Giving that back to you and say, hey, Craig, did you know that? And then you fill in the blank. Did you know that, when doing these podcasts and talking sports, which we were a little bit, I just see a glow on your face. Is that something that you're interested in? And then asking some very intentional, pointed questions and really just kind of bubbling up or surfacing some of that deep joy that's in you, that in these certain experiences, it comes out. And so that's how we identify the discover process.
I've had, 300 guys that have played in the NFL. And one thing about the NFL, it stands for not for long. So at some point in time, even if you're Tom Brady and you play forever, you're going to move on. And there is a kind of there's almost like a timestamp for athletes to like figure out what they're going to do next. And it takes sometimes 3 to 5 years. I would say on the short side, 3 years. And what I used to do and still do from time to time when I have these conversations is, okay, what are you naturally good at?
Yeah.
Like, what do people like? Who do your friends see you as an expert? What aspect of life are you? What is your zone of genius, so to speak? Then the second thing is, what are you passionate about besides football? Because everybody's got, it's music, it's something. Okay, so now we got those two passions or those two items. Then the third thing is how can you make a big impact on your people and on your community? Because if you take what you're good at and you take what you love and you can make an impact at the intersection of all three of those is what you should do. And does it always give us the answer? Of course not. But it does help the guys move in the right direction, because that is the biggest struggle that guys have is we're human beings, but we see each other as human doers.
Yeah.
So like, hey bro, what do you do? And you tell me. And now we go down this road of what you do. I don't even know who you are, but I know what you do.
There you go.
So, one of my sons made it to the NFL for 3 years, and it's like, people, you see it, and even in the family. Oh, he's a football player. No, he's not a football player.
That's what he does.
That's what he does. So how do you formulate identity in the scope of discovery? Because so many people think they are what they do.
Listen, that's one of the big things. I call it my AI factor. I'm going to give you an AI factor. AI is applied insights. And so for that, and so I dehumanize, because a lot of people AI, and it's a scary thing. And I said, no, AI is applied insights. Let me give you some insights that you can apply. So gifts and talents. So talents are innate abilities, the ability to fill in the blank, the ability to play professional sports. And it is a unique gift. But could one say that that is a superpower? Well, again, I'm using the term super purpose power. And so there's the talent that exists for all professional athletes. I don't care who you are. As a professional athlete, you've made it, and the talents that you have been born with, those innate abilities that are associated with it, that's what it is. Oftentimes, people associate their talents and the activity of applying those talents to their identity. That's the bridge. Most people, and we can even apply this in the business world, the frustration comes in, where people's talents, let's say there's a professional athlete and they still have a mindset that they want to perform in those talents. Well, talents deteriorate. in the NFL and other places, not for long, right? If you bank your identity on your activity, you will be frustrated 100%. Your identity is what you really need to cultivate, even in the midst of a professional career. It's what you said, Craig. That's what you do. It's not who you are. And so what we want to try to do when you're rising to your role in life is you're rising to your identity, not the activity. I tell you, I was coaching some executives and the board was trying to kick them out of their role and their title as CEO. And I said, well, what is it that your purpose for being a CEO is? And they went through this checklist with me and they discovered they were fighting for their title. You apply that with athletes as well. You're fighting for your title, but you're not fighting for your identity. Once you find your identity, that level of fulfillment, you can walk away really easy and you can continue to go on.
You mentioned that you operate in the zone of mind, body, and spirit.
Yes.
And I believe that our true identity is rooted in our spirit. Right? So how does identity and spiritual world, how does that mesh? How does your identity show up in your spiritual life?
So, for me, because you took it there, the ordained pastors. So I am going to bring this forward. Thank you for that invitation. I would refer to the passage in the Bible, Romans 8, the entire chapter. Romans 8 talks about life in the spirit. And Romans 8 and 12 specifically mentions and it walks through how to live a life in the spirit. And so it talks about even having a life that can defeat, and in this term, we're not talking about the mortal death, but a spirit that can defeat the death of things. That's that superpower. And that's that internal spirit that creates the ability to, in the middle of your storm, you're having a losing season. We can keep it on a sports analogy. You're having a losing season. There's not good chemistry. There's all kinds of things that, you've prepared for, but there are circumstances around you. Things aren't going your way. You're picking up the L's. But if you live a life in the spirit, it's not a loss, it's a learning. And so a life in the spirit will tell you that I am gaining this experience, which will help to produce a better outcome. And that's why I use the term inevitable outcomes, because the more discipline, the more you operate in your spirit, the more you live in that spiritual realm, the less the external factors will be big factors.
Expand on that.
Because you're going to know that is just coming, that loss is coming as a temporary issue. And that the bigger issue is I'm able to take this to create a bigger and a better foundation so that even if, let's say, I walk away from it and I have a bad experience, I may walk away from that bad experience so that I can share with others what not to do. So therefore, I'm living in a legacy building time for myself, even though it seems bad for me. And again, that's part of like the discipline, and I'll use that word and we can go with that, of rising to the role. The discipline of rising to the role is whatever it might be, it can serve a purpose. Maybe not for me, but for someone else that I can share to say, this is what maybe not to do or the route not to take.
Okay, Randall, we're finished with discovery.
Okay.
We kind of have an idea of our identity and we're being intentional about who we are and who God created us to be.
Mm-hmm.
We're crystal clear. How do we develop now?
Develop is coming through a process. And so here's how I break down a process. A process is create a concept. Create a concept. Then once you create that concept, you're going and create a model for the concept that allows for you to have a discipline to operate in that framework. That's how you develop it. So I want to start with kind of creating that framework, because the frame creates borders for you. So on the days where you don't feel like it, on the days where, you have other things to do, on the days where you're just really tired, that concept and that framework is still there waiting for you. And so the development part is, and I call it the bridge between an aspiration, because so many people, they go from discovering it to, hey, I want to display it. But no, you got to take your time so that you can cultivate it. Discover, you got to cultivate. And cultivation is sometimes developing just like a seed that's planted, not buried, because there's a difference between being planted and buried. And if that seed is planted, you have to go and you have to workshop it and you have to work it and you have to work the process. And in working that process, there is a discipline factor that needs to be attached to it. So here's the bridge. The bridge between aspiration and goals is discipline and consistency. And so there are two pillars to that. Discipline means you have to develop the methodology to do it. Consistency is you have to do it over and over and just getting the reps in. And inevitably, growth is attracted to discipline. That's how
Wow.
you develop. That's simple. It's the simple process of developing. And then part of the development is defending the challenge that comes with those days that it may not be working for you. You may not feel like it. You'll get opposition. You'll get no's. So part of that is defending. So develop is defending as well.
Call that also resetting, and
Yes.
it affects how you respond because, everybody's got a plan, everybody's got dreams and goals, and then you get a curveball and you face some adversity. And like even in a game, like in baseball, we have this concept of a perfect game. You could literally be a pitcher. They don't do it anymore because they don't pitch 9 innings, but you could pitch 9 innings and get 27 outs and pitch a perfect game and throw like 60 balls, called balls, out of the strike zone. It's not a perfect game, but it's called a perfect game. And expand on the difference between planted and buried.
When something is planted, it has potential. Let's say you are, you're on the team, but you don't get playing time. That's being available, but not used. The seed is down there. It's available, but it's not been used yet. It's not showing itself. And the planting is the potential that's there needs to be cultivated. And maybe it needs to go through some experiences. Maybe it needs some, and it's, being planted is a lot of times it's not fun because it's still under dirt.
It's dark.
And it is a place where you could actually create an opportunity for yourself to, because it is a dark place, because sometimes it's a lonely place, because sometimes it's a place where the only audience that you see is you in the mirror. And that's an opportunity to say, here's what I am going to be in my coming out. Being buried is settling for where you are underneath that dirt with no desire, no ability, no practice to put yourself out there on display. Because once a seed, and then also you have to understand being planted and being a seed, there's a breaking process. Seeds don't do anything until they're broken. And so whether it's a breaking of the reps, the habits, you got to make sure that you break out of whatever it is that, that is there, and preparing for your potential is the planting of when you come up and out. Being buried, again, being comfortable where you are, not having an aspiration, not wanting to go through the breaking process. Because if a seed is staying underneath there, that same seed, but they don't want to go through the breaking process, they'll never bloom. Without breaking, there is no blooming when you're buried.
And when you're buried, it's a dead seed. And when you're alive, when you're planted, because from my person, just kind of like metaphorically, what I see in that is that someone that says they have a dream and that's taking action to change so they can become the person that is worthy of the dream, compared to the person that just says, I would love to do this, love to be this, and they don't take any action. They're not going to move. They're going to be buried. They're dead. They're going to be the same in 5 years as they are today. Where the person that is planted also is getting nurtured, is learning, growing, connecting with people, learning a new skill, whatever it is, taking risk.
Absolutely. And here's the irony of what you just described so beautifully, Craig, is that a lot of people decide and they discover they have talents, but they just leave it right there and they're buried. Going back to, if you look at biblical scripture, it's
Yep.
burying your talents, literally.
Yeah.
And if you don't look at it as an expansion of who you are and don't develop, so discover, but don't develop it, they'll stay buried. That's where the discover, develop before you display comes into play.
Well, something I like to talk about with parents and whatnot about with, that have kids that are they look good getting off the bus. God bless them. They didn't have to do anything to be 6'5". Like they just roll out of bed and they're 6'5". It's like, that's a gift. That's a talent. Okay. Some kids that are 5'8" would love to be 6'5".
Yeah.
Like most people think in 2D. And what I mean by that is you take your talent and you work hard. And that's the extent of your performance. That's like almost the cap of your performance, unless you add mindset. And so when you take your talent, you take hard work ethic, and then you have a great mindset, you can grow, you can expand, you can overcome adversity, you can do all these things. So that's why sometimes guys that get drafted in the 7th round that people passed over, 200 and like Brock Purdy for the 49, 261 times NFL teams passed over him until the Niners took him with the last pick, and he's making $50 million and he's a really good player. So at the end of the day, it's like he has to have something where he's a planted seed to develop into what he's become. Because if everybody saw it on draft day, draft weekend, he wouldn't have been the 262nd pick. Same thing happened with Tom Brady. So then you have guys that get drafted in, let's say, the top 3, and they're supposed to be franchise saviors. And 5 years later, half the fans can't remember his name.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to get specific, there are number ones that are out there.
Yeah.
You use Tom Brady, you use Brock Purdy, but they're number ones. So here's on both sides of it, because, Kwame Brown or Jamarcus Russell, right? So Kwame Brown, the Washington Wizards, and Jamarcus Russell, the Los Angeles, at that time, Oakland Raiders. So they were number ones. And then on the other end, use the example, Brock Purdy and Tom Brady were at the back end, even Brock Purdy being Mr. Irrelevant. So here's the thing. Here's the key. Here's how you make yourself relevant, whether you're 1 or 265. It is the mindset shift. And this is what I say that I do. I said, my story, and bottom line, I inspire people to ignite a cognitive reshaping that allows them to decide, discover, develop, and display their super purpose power that will create inevitable outcomes that works for everything. So that's my mantra. That's what I do. So here's the number 1 to number 265 from irrelevant. One is called relevant because they're a number 1. The others labeled irrelevant because they were picked at the back. Here's the thing. It's a mindset shift. Here's where we talked about that inner spirit, the superpower. Your mind has to say, I am identified not by what the world tells me, but with who I know I am. And that starts inside of you. And so to shift that inside of you, you have to start with your mind. The mind is the most powerful muscle, and it trumps all other things. But whether you're 6'5", 260 pounds, can run a 4.4, 4.5, or, you're 5'10", you got picked, I think Brock Purdy's 5'11", and picked there. Neither should have let the world define them as a number 1 or a number 265. Neither of them should have done that. They should have found that purpose power inside of them, complementary of what the world says, and identity driven versus role driven. Again, that's how you rise to your own personal role. It's not taking the role of what the world defines you as. It's taking the role of what your spirit and your inner self shows you as.
1000% agree with you, Randall. I call it the inside game versus the outside game. And so the guys that play the inside game, that know who they are despite their circumstances. So let's just take draft weekend, and Brock Purdy's down there in Scottsdale, Arizona with his family, hoping to get picked. and pick after pick goes by. And everybody's like, oh my God, they needed a quarterback. They didn't take you. Most people that play an outside game go, I must not be any good. Nobody likes me. By the end of the draft, they're just like exhausted and they've lost their entire worth because they pegged their worth to where they were going to get drafted.
Yes.
Guys that play the inside game, which Brock obviously has, or he wouldn't be where he's at, is it doesn't matter. If I'm the first pick, the last pick, or somewhere in between, or not at all, I'm still going to go do my thing. I'm still going to be who I am. I'm still going to show up the way I know how to show up. And that's where I think athletes get tricked on draft weekend through the whole draft evaluation process into you get drafted in the first round, you get the financial benefit of being a first rounder, fully guaranteed contract, 5-year deal, blah, 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 averaging, 27 million a year or 20 something million in total, guaranteed that you're important. But if you get drafted in the 7th round and you get a signing bonus similar to less than what the law students are getting when they come out of law school or work for a law firm, you're not important because you're playing an outside game. Social media magnifies it. The media, the mainstream sports media that pegs this guy, think about the draft coverage. 98% of the draft coverage for any of the 32 teams is about one guy.
Yeah.
The first guy. The other guys are chumps. Well, we got to talk about second, third rounder just because they might be good. But the third day guys, they're chumps. They're afterthoughts. They don't get flown in on the private jet to go do a press conference with the media, introduce them to the, Raider Nation or whatever team it is. So how do you as a young man, which is reflective of everybody, play an inside game about who you are with that spiritual foundation when the world tells you you're only important if you fit this profile?
Well, first of all, it's the concept of you are wonderfully and marvelously made. Let's start with the foundation of that from a inside game spiritual standpoint, because there's something marvelous and wonderful about you. Because if we watch social media, we listen to the reporters, the reports, everyone is assessing you on talents, but they're not assessing the individual. Listen, I heard it was Allen Iverson has a documentary, and Stephen A. Smith said, I did two things. I said to Allen when I first started covering the Philadelphia 76ers as a beat writer back in the 90s, he said, I will do absolutely everything to protect you as a person. But what I won't do is I will be brutally honest as a performer or athlete, right? A lot of people lose their identity on the latter part, on the performer athlete. A lot of people only identify themselves as, I wasn't the first one picked. I would even venture to say someone who was expecting to get picked number one and may have Shador Sanders got picked in the 5th round. What type of mental gamesmanship is that for a person that's not spiritually, mentally grounded in who they are? They lose their identity based on the external outside game factors because they're listening to those reporters whose job it is to assess them on performance, and people tie identity to activity. And that's the spiritual awakening that the identity, I'll go back to what I first started. Your identity is you are wonderfully and marvelously made. Start with that. Create a discipline. And here's where I put the framework and methodology in. Framework that allows for that wonderful, marvelous you, that value asset to come out. And it may come out in different ways. Maybe not during the course of a game as an athlete. Maybe it comes out in so many different ways. There's so many athletes now that NFL not for long, after 3 years, now they see I've got another 30 years to create a value asset for myself. That's rising to your role in life.
Amen, brother. Amen. I think the thing that is really difficult for these athletes, pro athletes, is the world is screaming very loudly, and it's a constant, like, you can't turn down the music because it's so loud. Okay,
Yeah.
and it's like you're only as good as you perform. You're only as good as your contract. The more money you make, the more important you are. You're only as good as where you're at on the depth chart. You're only as good as about, how many people want to do marketing and endorsement deals with you. And Think about the concept of there's a few guys that play professional sports that are really good, but they're not in every commercial, like Peyton Manning or Christian McCaffrey and some of those kind of guys. They some people might some athletes will be like, well, I guess I'm not important, depending on whether that activity and their identity are connected in a way they shouldn't be. And if they're disassociated, what they do from who they are, it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's talk about the last D,
Display.
display.
The display is, what is it that you're using your talent, your gifts for? And that's the question that a lot of athletes, they're using it. Are you using it in service of, quite honestly, some say I'm using it so that I can make a living and support, generations to come by doing this. I'm displaying it for that. Some people say I am hyper competitive. I am going out here so that in every situation I win. Well, we know in athletics, there's no undefeated ever. So we have to look at, you're displaying it and ask the question, first of all, because I used a couple of examples of the why you're displaying it: generations, legacy, winning. Some people display it so that they can prove to others their value in their activity, not identity, activity. So there's so many different facets and aspects of displays. What we really have to do is we have to say, for what, for who, for why. And that's what I challenge people. When you display what you have, for what, for who are you doing it for, and why are you doing it? And a lot of times, the really talented people in life, that why, that's a real challenge question. Why are you displaying? Why are you doing it? Why are you putting yourself out there on display? Why? And a lot of times, we looking from the outside make assumptions as to why.
And to add to that, I would say that impact and why are similar but different, because it's like Jesus wanted us to make an impact on his kingdom, and his kingdom is people. It's not things, it's not places. And everybody needs to know what they do, why they do it, and what kind of impact they can make in a good way. And I think that creates synergy. I think it creates motivation. It creates momentum when people get really honed in on the impact that they make. Okay, my man, that was pretty good. That was really good, by the way. Let me ask you this. Share with everybody your book, Rise to Your Role. We probably covered the framework of your book today, is my guess. I haven't read your book, but I've covered pretty much the nucleus of your book. Okay. So now let's put you in your book. Share with everybody your story of how you discovered, how you developed, and how you display.
Yeah, it came at an early age. I talk about in the book Rise to the Role, and it is available on Amazon, Rise to the Role. I talk about at 8 years old, playing baseball, actually, not getting selected for baseball, being what many would consider below average, average to mediocre as far as talent level as it relates to baseball. And eventually, through my parents coaxing the coach, who also attended our church, so there is a value in church, they enticed him to put me on the team. And so I realized the decision point came at that point where there was only one number left. And back in the 70s, when I played at this point, 13 was considered an unlucky number. No one wanted it. And that was the only number available left. And so what I decided at that age is that here's what I decided. I said, I'm going to take whatever it is that I have, and I had the ability to run and use that and leverage that. So I discovered there was something that was unique about me, and that I was one of actually like running one of the fastest, even at that age, on the team. And so I took that ability to run, and during practice, that's where I showed up, because that's where I said, I have a unique value that may help the team. And then from there, I went through the process of the season came and went, barely got any time. I struck out when they put me in at the end of the games, and it was a pretty trying time. But then I developed a cadence for myself, and I said, no one's going to help me. My parents helped me get on the team, but no one's going to help me moving forward. So I developed a discipline of going out, and I had the blessing of living across from what we called a cavalry field. It was an Army cavalry field that was open space where I would go out, throw the ball in the air, and hit and hit and hit. And sometimes I would hit the ball, pop up in the air, and run to try to catch it before it fell. That was the development part. I developed my own cadence, any free time. And here's where the consistency came in. I did it that spring after baseball, all summer, going into the fall. I developed a disciplined, consistent cadence so that when it came time, and we happened to actually move at that time. And so when we moved, I moved
Hold on a
into
second. When you moved, your parents got in a church where the pastor had influence and could get you on the next team. No, I'm kidding.
bad. We moved, but we stayed with the same church.
Oh, okay.
So I was out of the district of that particular league, but by the time I had moved, new start, fresh start. So what I displayed to this new team, new set of coaches, and I'm just using this as one example, but when I got there, I displayed something that was not only the gift of what I had, but the gift of what I gained. And that was the ability to hone in on my skills to be a little bit better, so that by the end of the third season, I was a regional all-star. I was one of the best in the area at what I did. So here's the thing. I didn't know how to describe what I just said: decide, discover, develop, display. But what I did was I took that and I applied that to everything in my life, whether it was school, because I was an average student. You know, I was kind of always middle of the road. But what I found is I applied that. I have said, okay, let me decide to do this. Let me find out what the one thing is that I'm really good at in the process of this classroom. And then let me work on that thing, because there is a value in that unique gifting that everyone has. And I realized, and that was a cadence, and that took me to, I've completed several marathons, triathlons, a fitness trainer, ordained pastor, and a coach that has enabled me to take these experiences. And it's through that method. It's just taking the ordinary, finding that inner spirit superpower, and transforming the ordinary to extraordinary. And that's how I wanted to write the book, to say to others, professionally, from a sports standpoint, in life, you can take your ordinary to extraordinary. It's a methodical process that starts with that inner spirit and the mindset shift.
So think about all the people that we're catching them in stride right now.
Mm-hmm.
You got the teenager that is dreaming about what he or she wants to do when they grow up. You got the college kid that's trying to figure out what I'm going to, what's going to be my first career. You got your 30-something-year-old that's maybe in the family business, as well as trying to maybe find a new career because they've run into roadblocks in their career. And I could go on through the decades. They can take your methodology, your process, and from my perspective, just in talking to you today, they can have if they take radical responsibility in all three areas. They have to figure out who they are. They have to have the discipline so that they can develop, and then they can display. They can change their lives
and create what I call inevitable outcomes for themselves and everything around them. That's a powerful thing.
Yes. I was just talking to one of my athletes yesterday, and we were talking about the standard of leave no doubt. So go back to your, competition days as a young athlete. When the coach has a doubt, you're giving him the power, because if he's not sure you know what you're doing, he's not sure he can trust you, he's not sure you're going to be consistent, he's not even sure you know the playbook, depending on what sport it is. The first time you mess up, it's yanking you out of the game, putting his guy in because you left doubt. When you leave no doubt, he can't. And inevitable outcome is a sister to leave no doubt.
Amen, brother. I received that. I love that.
Right?
Absolutely. And that's taking command and control of your ecosystem. And when you walk in that type of confidence, it shows. You don't have to say anything. It shows.
Well, with athletes and C-suite people, staff people, doesn't matter what genre you're in, what area of life you're in, we're speaking 24/7 and our lips are not even moving. That nonverbal communication is big. And so, if you don't have your game on, everybody kind of knows it. Anybody that has any awareness at all,
Yes.
especially the people that supervise you or people that you answer to, those type of people. So, okay. I want to thank you for being on the show today. This was awesome. I want to know if there's anything you would like to add that I didn't ask.
I would say this. I would really have nothing to add because I think it was a pretty dope conversation. I think that if anyone wants to get a hold of me, Rise to the Role on Amazon or In Spirit, because we talked about that inner winner. So In Spirit Institute.com, social media, In Spirit Institute, Instagram, Facebook, and I would say that aspire to rise because it's there. Just break out and bloom and make it happen. That's really what I'd have to say, but nothing else to add.
Well, Randall, I want to thank you very much for being on Pro Mindset today. I want to thank you for sharing your gift, your zone of genius, so to speak. And for anybody that missed the locations of tracking him down, you can check out the show notes and you can find him. And have an awesome day today, man.
Thank you. And this was a gift for me. I've learned a lot, and this is an awakening and another level and zone. So thank you. I really appreciate it, Craig.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Hey, it's Craig Domann, the host of Pro Mindset Podcast. I want to thank you for listening or watching today's show. And you can catch us every week on the normal social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the listening podcast platforms. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And more importantly, I hope you gained a pro mindset insight. Please be sure to rate and review Pro Mindset Podcast. And I look forward to catching up with you on our next show.